Welcome to the Real Python Podcast. This is episode 1, and my name is Christopher Bailey, your host. And this week, I have a conversation with Geir Arne Hjelle, one of the authors here at Real Python. We talk about Python decorators and his background, do a little bit of introspection to discuss the Real Python editing process. Then we talk about some of the articles he's written for the site and touch on his talk at PyCon last year. One programming note. In this episode, we discuss PyCon US 2020. The episode was recorded at an earlier date, and at this moment, PyCon US 2020 is looking at its options for rescheduling or a potential cancellation. I'll continue to give you additional updates on PyCon US in upcoming episodes as we find out more information. And now, here's episode 1. So let's get started. The Real Python Podcast is a weekly conversation about using Python in the real world, interviews with experts in the community, and discussions about the topics, articles, and courses found at realpython.com. After the podcast, join us and learn real-world Python skills with a community of experts at realpython.com. Hey, welcome to the podcast. So where are you joining me from?
I'm in Oslo in Norway.
So on the other side of the planet, I'm here in Colorado. Mm-hmm. Where it's currently snowing. We were talking earlier about weather.
Right, yeah. I'm kind of envious of your snow, but we'll probably get some here as well.
Why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about how you got involved with Python, and then eventually Real Python.
Right. Yeah, so if I'm kind of going all the way back first for some background, I have been coding essentially forever because my dad got a Commodore 64 when I was a young boy, and I think he just wanted to play games on it, but I figured I could do a little bit of basic on it, and then I kind of got coding when I was like 8-9 years old, which has been a big gift to kind of have that possibility. And then I had a brief interaction with Python at a summer internship about 20 years ago now, I guess, but that was Python 1.6, I believe. And
wow,
for some reason, I think it seemed complicated. I don't know why, but I think it was just that sort of like the lack of structure that I was used to at the time from Java and these kind of things. You kind of had the main entry point and so on. So I put it aside for many years, and then 2012, I think I kind of got a little bit back into it and was totally blown away by how quick and easy it was to write. I think the first project was a small parser that we wanted to essentially create a report, PDF report from something. And it was, I kind of set aside, this would take a long time, but then in 2 hours and we were done, and it's kind of, oh, that's it. This is fantastic.
Nice.
So then I've kind of been using it more and more, and I changed jobs back in 2014. I started working for the Norwegian Mapping Authority, and they're kind of getting into an old project that was using Fortran, but we were then essentially started rewriting it and started using Python for that. So then I really got deep into Python, and we did all kinds of stuff from compiling some Fortran to stuff we could read from Python. So essentially got Fortran into Python modules in a sense. And then doing a lot of the NumPy work to kind of get this thing to run around. That gave me a lot of experience with Python, which was really cool. And I just got to love it more and more.
Yeah, it's nice to be able to convert something that's already existing and have a direction you're headed in. And is the company using any Fortran anymore?
At least for this project, we're pure Python now. So that was very nice. It kind of got rid of essentially 200,000 lines of Fortran code or something like this.
Wow,
into something
that's a lot.
That's a lot. Into something that's much easier to handle in Python. So that was a fun project to work on. Then I guess it's about 2 years ago now. Yeah, early 2018. I heard Dan Bader was on I think it was the Python Bytes podcast, where he announced that he had, or mentioned that he had kind of taken over the Real Python website. And I already knew Dan a little bit from his newsletters. And then in one of the newsletters, essentially said, do you want to write for us? Send me a note. And I did send a quick note and got an answer, and essentially got what we typically do for people coming in as authors is giving them a trial article to write. So that's kind of your how to get into the team. So I picked an article about pathlib, which is this very nice library for working with paths. And
Yeah.
I guess it came in Python 3.4, so it's starting to become quite solid one. And I hadn't used it too much then, but I figured this would be a good exercise in getting to know the library and so on. I just had a few experiences with which were very good. Then I was kind of working through that article, and I remember I was actually on in a cabin in the mountains in actually northern Sweden when I got a message from Dan saying that he really liked the article and welcomed me on board the team. So that was fun. So since then, I've written something like 7 or 8 articles by now.
Oh, that's great.
Gotten to write quite a few articles, and then now I'm also been working on the team doing tech reviews for other articles. So essentially, I guess we should at some point explain the whole publishing pipeline with you.
Yeah, what's the pipeline look like? Where does tech review fit in?
So it started when I first wrote the first article. That was quite early. So it was essentially Dan was reviewing my article, giving some notes, and we were back and forth a little bit. But since then, it's kind of grown a lot and set up a full pipeline. So we have an editor, Joanna Jablonski, who is kind of still doing a lot of stuff. But then during the pipeline, we also offload some of the responsibility to other people on the team. So the pipeline now is essentially that you first write an outline for an article, and then that's being reviewed. You get some comments on it, then you go off and write you write the article essentially. And once that's done, it's sent over to another team member for a technical review where we kind of make sure that the technical aspects of the article make sense. And then it's passed on to a didactic review where we kind of consider the article as something that would be useful for people to learn from and so on. Can we make this, how can we best address the readers and make sure everything is understandable? And then finally, there's the stage where we do a language edit. So kind of clean up all the, in my case, all the commas tend to move around at the language edit stage.
Sure.
So I'm pretty sure the comma rules are different in Norwegian and English because I still can't really wrap my head around that part. It's quite a process. But that's kind of been one of the really cool things with getting involved with this was that I didn't really expect is how much I've been learning myself, both about how to write and about Python itself, of course, and then getting to know all the people on the team and so on. So it's been a really rewarding commitment in a sense. So, So as I mentioned, I'm doing some tech reviews, but then the last year or so, I've been doing most of the outline reviews at Real Python as well. So, which is really cool because then I get to communicate a little bit with all the new authors coming on board, and I get to kind of see most articles before, most anybody else. So that's also been a lot of fun to do. And we do these reviews. So the outline review and the didactic review I typically do as videos. So we kind of sit down. So I typically make a video that's probably 10 to 15 minutes long for each outline and kind of talk through it, help the readers along a little bit, come with some ideas for how to structure things and so on.
Are you showing, say, the wording of the outline as you're going through that? Or is it just you yourself, like on a screen capture?
So we do a screenshot, essentially looking at the outline, commenting on the different things. So
okay,
me, I'm only audio, but
yeah. I have a similar path in the sense that I got introduced to Dan's work through his Python Tricks book, and I think he was on again one of the other podcasts, probably Talk Python, talking about that book. And so then I joined the newsletter, same kind of deal, and then he was looking for people to do video courses about this time last year. And I have a background in teaching for, over 10 years and a background in like Final Cut Pro, and was just kind of getting into Python. I had maybe a year under my belt in Python. I had been using SQL and a little of data science in R and a platform called FileMaker Pro. And so I was super excited with the idea of like, okay, like you said, this is a really awesome way to learn. And sometimes teaching is one of the best ways to learn a new topic and have to really explain it to somebody else in that way. And so I've really enjoyed that process. And in kind of a similar way, I had to create a pilot. I created my first course was a pilot course on requests. And over the last year now, I'm kind of in the process of, in my own reviewing, I'm reviewing the courses as they're created by the other video course creators. And so I kind of get to see them, like you said, in sort of a raw form and provide feedback and try to help people polish them up. And all this in some ways is helping Dan kind of continue to, spin many plates in other areas. So the team kind of grows, and which is working out really good, I think.
Yeah, no, it's been a lot of fun to see the growth and how Dan is always something new happening there. So, and
yeah,
I must admit that I didn't hear too much about the video team before you guys were kind of on. And I think one of my first experiences, which were really cool, was I think one of your, apparently not the first, but one of your first videos was the one about decorators.
Yeah, that's what we're here to talk about too.
Exactly. And I didn't even know this was being made until it just popped up there. And then I kind of, that's interesting. I want to see what this is about. And then you had essentially converted my article then into a video, which was a lot of fun to kind of just essentially see my words made into a video.
Come out of somebody else's mouth.
Right.
And lots of highlighting. And it was, I really like working on your stuff. Actually, I think it's we've had 3 collaborations now sort of through the different courses and articles.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I couldn't get, I couldn't quite fit all of the article into my course. I'd have to go back and look at the actual total length, but yeah, it's like, it's kind of neat. You go way into some really great depth. So somebody wants to dip their toes into it, they can really get an idea of like, okay, this background of what decorators are, and then kind of keep stacking on top additional levels if somebody wants to keep going and go deeper into it. So I really like that about it.
Right. Yeah. Because I guess a little bit of background, because I think that was my fourth article that was published, because we rushed in a Python 3.7 in the middle. It was an article that already existed on the site before Dan took over.
Who is the original author on that?
Oh, I think it's Michael Herman that did it.
Okay.
He was one of the founders of Real Python.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen exact kind of credits for the old stuff, but I think that was his. I remember it was a very neat article already, and it has a very nice introduction into essentially how decorators are really just functions applied to functions. That's essentially what they do. And had a nice explanation of how inner functions work and these things that you kind of need a background for.
Yeah, that's one of those things that I think is really crucial. Like the concept that, to give people a background on it. I know that I had seen the syntactic sugar of the @ symbol, just kind of going through tutorials on my own and trying to learn things like Flask or Django or other places, and going, okay, I'm not sure what that symbol means and what's going on inside there. And so that's why I really wanted to jump on getting into the weeds and learning all the different details of it. So
because I guess decorators are this kind of interesting feature where they feel to some extent natural in that you can kind of understand what they mean. For instance, if you have a property inside of a class, there's just this word saying property on top of it. So it thinks, okay, this is probably a property. Or with the Flask, I guess you have the login required decorator that kind of just sits atop there. So it kind of makes sense what it's supposed to do, but how it technically works is a whole other story, right?
Yeah, it's such a neat tool to be able to reuse code and not have to, in the case of some of the examples given in the tutorial, where you're going in and showing a reusability of something like a logger or timing functions or slowing down code. I think that's really, really powerful.
Yeah.
But I actually thought about the other day, I was a little confused on a topic myself, again, having not had as much time in it. I've been reviewing a lot of courses that are about object-oriented stuff lately. And I really wondered about that property decorator and, the difference between an attribute and converting it into a property is you really get the ability to add those getter and setter sort of customizable methods, as opposed to any kind of data coming in. You could clean what's coming in when you go to set something, test for things. You've had a class about a car and you had an attribute that was like, storage space or something like that. somebody could just change that and assign it to a negative number, which wouldn't really make any sense. And so
Right.
by then turning it into a property, when you go to set that value, it could respond back and say, well, that's actually, invalid. That wouldn't work. In this case, you can't have a, negative value in this car or something.
Right. Yeah. And I think if you're kind of coming from languages like Java, where you have explicit getters and setters, the property is exactly that for Python. And I kind of like the way it's implemented is very, it's not obtrusive at all. And it kind of gives you the opportunity to kind of easily switch if you have an attribute that you start out with, but then you realize I really need to, for instance, as you say, restrict certain values. So I should take care in my setter that only certain values are allowed. Then you can just add this property instead. So change your attribute to a property and all the code stays the same on the outside, but you get this extra feature.
Really clean.
Yeah. So you can kind of refactor later instead of, in Java, you typically make your getters and setters in case you need them with a lot of templating code. While in Python, you can kind of just use the attributes as long as they're good enough, and then you can change later if needed. So I really like that model.
It's nice about Python in that sense. At a basic level, you can really, like you said, very quickly structure something, and then you can add the complexity as you go. And that's one of the things I kind of like about it.
Yeah.
You don't have to just, comparing like something simple like Hello Worlds between, Java and Python.
Yes.
It's so amazing. When I started planning this interview with you, I ran across this talk that you'd done, PyCon 2019.
Right.
And it was about plugins.
Yep.
You want to go over what you were talking about there?
Yes. So this is essentially something that I kind of worked out a little bit for myself, but kind of like probably too much to abstract code a little bit out and essentially, or especially things like keeping things that should be configurable outside of the code itself, so I can easily change them. And one thing that I kind of ended up doing in many of my projects is that, say, I want to test different models, for instance. So currently I'm working on a soccer app, and I want to do different models for modeling a shot. And then instead of kind of needing to hard code into the code itself how to do stuff, it's nice to just have a config file that could even be triggered by some options that kind of says, okay, use this model or that model and so on. And what that kind of translates to on the back end is that I want to be able to run different methods or different functions. And of course, you can do this by putting all your functions into a dictionary and then kind of doing dispatch from that or something like that. But that suddenly means that you need to maintain a list of which functions are available, and you can end up with then writing in the function name several places. So after a while, when I discovered decorators in Python and figured that I could use a decorator to add stuff automatically to that dictionary that I can dispatch from. So essentially, instead of having a decorator that actually changes my function, I just have a decorator that can register that the function exists. So that's what I essentially then call a plugin, is a function that is registered somewhere. And then I can just go through and, for instance, read method names from a config file or from options and things like this, and then I can dispatch to the functions based on that. And this says, at least to me, it really works as a very nice general kind of way of structuring my programs. And I've been very happy with that way of working. The talk on PyCon last year was essentially a quick example of how that is set up, and showing then, I believe that was, I did a quick example of a plotting tool that could plot different file types with different plots. So you kind of have, you needed different readers, data readers that were able to dispatch based on the file name, and then you can.
Okay. So like if you had an Excel file versus just a straight CSV or a text file or something.
Right, exactly. So it's a CSV file. You use probably pandas read CSV, and then for JSON, you can use the built-in JSON library and things like this.
Okay, great. Nice.
So that's something that I use it for all my work, essentially. So I have created a small package, which it's still not properly documented, so I haven't really been showing it off too much, but it's called Pyplugs, which is then essentially has this register decorator and ways to dispatch from that. As I said, really effective way of working
when you did that talk, I'll include a link in the show notes to it because it's available on YouTube, right?
Yep.
And then do you have additional resources that you shared with the audience or the participants?
So the talk was essentially just the live coding through the example.
Okay.
And all my notes and the code that was there, I have on my GitHub page as well. So I have GitHub.
Okay.
Geir Arne Hjelle at /talks. So
okay, yeah, we can again include links to that stuff too.
Yeah.
So I actually just registered for PyCon a couple days ago, so I'm going to be going to Pittsburgh this year, which I'm super excited about. And while I was doing that, I noticed your name again.
Yes.
On there, and it looks like you're doing a tutorial this year.
Yeah, that was really fun to get accepted for that. So I proposed a tutorial on decorators, and so that will be a lot of fun to work out. So it will be, I guess, fairly similar to the article, and going into starting off with some of the basic decorators and then moving on to the more advanced stuff. So
nice.
I think I have just looking at my notes here for what I was saying. Yeah, so I'll probably talk a little bit about things like how to just get started with I think the hello world of decorators is often the timing decorator. It fits so nicely into this way of working.
Right.
But then kind of, I'll mention also how I do the plugin stuff, but then also more advanced stuff like runtime type enforcing and those kind of things. So kind of going through all the different things you can do with decorators. Again, I guess it's nice these things are filmed, and I really like all the work they do on PyCon in terms of getting resources also to people who are not able to attend and so on. So it's a very nice place to.
Are the tutorials a new thing that they're doing this year?
No, they have been doing them for quite a few years. So The way PyCon is set up is that at least the last couple of years, it's been 2 days of tutorials that are before the main conference. And then you have the 3 days of the main conference. And then you have I guess they're doing even 4 days of sprint afterwards, where you can kind of help.
Yeah.
Right. I think, so last year I was there for the tutorials and the conference and 2 days of sprints. And it seemed to quite a few people were going home after 2 days of sprints. But it's really a meeting place for all these different big projects. So you, if you're going, I would really recommend trying to stay for at least 1 day of sprints as well, and both getting to know some of the big projects there and meeting people and just hanging out, helping out there. It's a lot of fun.
Cool. So how many years have you gone to PyCon?
PyCon US was my first time, last year.
Yeah.
And partly, I live in Norway, so it's a long travel to go there.
Sure.
And so I've mostly been going to my kind of go-to conference that I've been going to now 5-6 years is SciPy, the European Scientific Python Conference, which is also a really nice. It's a much smaller conference, a couple of hundred people, but it's a really nice kind of meeting place. And now that I've been going there for some years, you meet lots of friends every time and so on. But it also has the kind of the same structure with tutorials and main conference and sprint, although just 1 day of sprint and so on. But then PyCon I've kind of been looking to, and okay, it would be fun to go, but it's a long travel and so on. But then after I joined Real Python and kind of realized that this would be a great chance to meet some of the other authors, some of the other team members, then I really figured, okay, I should try to go. And that was really a highlight last year, was kind of seeing these people that I mostly know through Slack chats and and avatars kind of come alive, and kind of seeing, oh, there's Dan, there's Jim, there's David, there's everybody. It was really nice. And I think this year will be even more real Python people there. So that should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, Dan's looks like he's got a booth.
Yeah.
Going to be a nice kind of central hub for us to meet at.
Exactly. Yeah. And probably the most fun stuff we did last year was we also did an open space on Real Python, where we just, anybody interested, come meet us. And we had something like 50 people join in a room, and we're kind of talking about
both
their experiences with real Python, but also what their kind of their wishes. So it was a lot of readers that are kind of what would they like to see going forward and things like this. So that was really interesting and a lot of fun to actually meet the people that you just see in comments and things like this.
Yeah, that's one kind of really cool thing that I noticed on that Decorators article is that I think it's 150 comments or something like that.
Right.
Yeah. So there's a lot of great interaction going on there. And,
yes.
And your responses are really great.
Yeah. And the comments is, if you kind of look at them, they kind of go back, I guess it's 5 years or something now, to back when the original article was first published.
Right.
Until it was, I guess, republished or updated was last summer. No, it's a year and a half ago, I guess, 2018. So it's been around for quite a while as well, but I think it's probably one of our more popular articles. I see in my stats that it always gets a good visit. So that's been a lot of fun. I think that was kind of one of essentially our worries also when we did the big update was because it was such a popular article. How would it work that we actually did this fairly big tweak to it, but it seems to have been working out nicely. And as you say, yeah, we gotten a lot of nice comments on it as well.
And then one of the things that we did last year after the video course came out, we decided, the three of us, Dan, you and me, to do sort of a Slack Q&A about decorators, and kind of opened up this whole forum, which was really neat. And we were able to save it as a downloadable PDF now.
Yeah.
Something kind of neat that we're always adding new things to the site to kind of help add more resources for learning on these different topics, which has been really kind of fun to help create.
Yeah, no, and I really like when we're able to kind of go back to some of our old goldies in a sense and add even more content around them. So from the, I guess, original article to kind of the more in-depth article to the video to the Q&A and things like this. So that's always a lot of fun. And I guess for this one, we don't have a quiz. I know I've been talking to Dan a few times that maybe we should make one, but I've never gotten around to it. But that's also some stuff we do at the site, right? So many of our articles have quizzes as well, which also seem to be a very popular feature with people. So
going back to your SciPy.
Yeah, Euro SciPy.
And the Euro SciPy, what time of year does that meet at?
That's usually end of August. This year it will be end of July instead, but it's I think otherwise it's been and last week of August.
So you would consider the role that you have at your work to be like a data scientist or a developer?
Yeah, I'm officially a data scientist, and I tried to kind of keep that title, and I really love programming, but I'm kind of thinking that it's always nice when I can use it as a tool to also do more stuff with it in a sense. At work, I work for a data science consultancy called Amesto NextBridge, and we're kind of trying to take on different projects where we do data science, machine learning, and those kind of things. So currently I'm working on two different projects. One is a soccer app where we're trying to analyze people shooting penalty kicks. And another one is where I'm working for more of an industrial partner that's doing krill fishing in the South Atlantic.
Oh, wow.
Two very different projects.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of fun to kind of try the different challenges and so on.
So for the soccer app, is that geared toward particular teams and like coaches helping improve the players, or is it something that an individual who wants to improve their own game would use?
Right. So it's a little bit of both. So it's the idea is that it should be something. If you kind of look at some of the big games like the World Cup and things like this, you'll see that you have all these fancy graphics, and it kind of tells you that Messi is shooting the ball in 120 kilometers an hour and things like this.
Right.
And for this, they of course use all these fancy sensors that you can't really use or buy yourself typically. So the idea has kind of been to see, can we get some of that that stuff, but essentially for free by just using your cell phone.
Okay.
So it's just an app on your cell phone, and then you kind of film yourself with this, and you need to do a little bit of setup to kind of, so we know where you filmed from and things like this. But then we kind of do a lot of computer vision based tracking of the ball and so on, and are able to calculate the speed and precision of your shots. And this can both be used just for yourself to kind of either test yourself if you're improving or play against friends. But the idea then is also that it can be used by coaches on teams and so on to kind of track the players or track people as they develop.
Nice.
So it's been it's been a fun project to work on, definitely.
And the other project, is that for helping with fishing or helping with just the overall environment in those areas for the krill?
Yes, so it's kind of improving on the fishing process in a sense. And one thing is that they're using a lot of fuel and steam. So kind of how can you make that more effective and so on is definitely a big thing. And then we've kind of been also looking into how can you more effectively find krill, which are these tiny little animals in the big sea. And
I always think of them as far as whales,
Right.
That's like the main thing they kind of, like a blue whale.
Right. Yeah. No. So that's actually one thing we've been looking a little bit at. There's this site that has a couple of GPS sensors placed on whales, and then they're tracking how the whales are moving and seeing if we can kind of learn anything from that. And of course, the whales really like krill, so we kind of see, interesting. He's being in that area. Maybe we should go there and fish and so on. There's all kinds of interesting ways to tackle these problems. And then finally, they have a factory where they kind of process the krill meal into oil. So it's also just optimizing the factory and things like this we're also looking into.
So your company that you're working for is a consultancy, you said.
Yeah.
And so they just get hired and you get put on a variety of different projects. And
right, exactly.
Like you were just recently traveling, you were here in the US for a little bit.
Yeah, that was visiting the factory and kind of getting to see a little bit firsthand how they're doing stuff, and then telling them what kind of things we can do for them and coming up with use cases where we can work on together. So that was a really nice workshop. That was last week. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds really exciting. We touched on it briefly about how people that are getting into Python programming have seen decorators in use,
right,
and don't really have an idea of really what's kind of going on behind the scenes, and maybe are just repeating the code. And a great way to kind of get into them is to really see the concept of, okay, the idea that a function is actually just another object, and then can be passed in as an argument or as a parameter into another function, is really initially kind of mind-blowing for a lot of programmers kind of getting started out. This idea of that, okay, well, I don't really ever think of like, functions being passed into functions.
Right.
But like you were saying a moment ago with your plugins, how the idea that, you could actually put functions into a structure such as, a list or a dictionary, and be able to call things out of them, which is really, kind of a powerful concept inside of Python, which is not really that hard to implement, once you kind of get the idea of it.
Right. Yeah. Now, once you wrap your mind around it, it's really easy, right? Because it's just another variable or something like this. But wrapping your mind around it is not necessarily trivial, depending a little bit on your background, I guess. But
yeah. And so the idea that you could have this, pre-built function, I guess there's some of them that, like we talked about property, as a decorator that comes, in the Python language itself.
Yep.
There are other ones that are pretty common too. That
I guess when you're talking object-oriented, you have property and class method and static method.
Oh, right.
And then you have the new data classes from 3.7 are implemented as a decorator.
Oh, those are decorators. Okay.
And
so what are examples of those data classes? Because I know you have an article on that too.
Right. So data classes is something that came with Python 3.7, and it has, I guess, a backport to 3.6. And it's really just a convenient way of defining classes. So a data class, once it's defined, is just a regular class. But the way you define it is that you just put a decorator on top saying this is a data class, and then you just specify the attributes that you kind of want to have. And then the init function or init method is implemented for you automatically. It puts a nice wrapper on it. And you can easily also have it automatically implement ordering methods and those kind of things. So it's mainly just a very convenient way of defining a class that I then tend to use for a few different projects, essentially.
I could imagine it'd be really good for data science-y kind of stuff where you're dealing with these sort of large groupings of data that you need to work through.
Right. And I think in some sense the name is slightly misleading in a sense, because when I hear a data class, right, I kind of go to the idea, okay, it's mainly maybe more like a struct of data or something like this that you find in other languages. But I find that if you just want to have a struct that's more like a name tuple kind of structure, gives you that. The data class kind of gives you a little bit more on top of and more flexibility. So I found myself often just using it for convenience. So actually, during the holidays, I got published an article about I think it's called the Python timers, 3 ways of monitoring your code. And in this one, it kind of starts a little bit with the whole, okay, we want to have a timer where we can just not to kind of like the time it, see how fast something is, but I just want to, every time I run my code, I want to just log how quickly it ran, just to keep a track of it and see that it works. Then ways you can do this, and if you start quite simple, you kind of just call on one of the timers that come bundled into Python, and you call it before your code and after your code, and then just subtract these things. That's fairly easy to do, but you can add a lot of extra code that may not really have anything to do with what you're doing, and it's a little bit cryptic. Why do you use this and that and so on? So just
takes away from the readability of it in some way.
Essentially. So just wrapping this into a class that I just call timer and then have a start and a stop on the timer just makes everything more readable. It's still the exact same lines essentially you need to do, but you get something that's more readable. And
nice.
And then if for this class, if instead of using a regular class, just throw the data class decorator on top of it, you get something that's very readable as well, because then you get the wrapper implemented for free, for instance, and you don't need to do the boilerplate stuff in the init method and so on. So that also just helps with implementation. Then you can kind of realize that, okay, I often do this timer start, timer end, and then some block in between. And that's really what's called the context in Python, that you have some block that you want to kind of tag with something. So then we implemented the timer as a context manager as well, so that your class can be used in this context settings where you can do with and then timer and then colon, and then you kind of have your block that you want to time. And then you don't need to do the start stop thing. Then it just times the blocks of code instead. And again, this is something that was quite easy to add to the class. Then we also quickly added decorator functionality to the class, so it can also be used as a decorator. So you can just put it on top of a function that you have, and then that function will always be timed when you run it. So kind of neat way of how, in the end, it kind of ends up being 30-40 lines of code. It's very short, but it kind of shows off then both classes, data classes, context managers, and decorators together in one.
It ties together a lot of your articles.
Right. So that one was a lot of fun to kind of put together, and it felt a little bit different from the other ones where we kind of go, for instance, in depth on the Python decorator, where it just kind of tells you enough to be dangerous in a sense with decorators and context managers and classes and so on.
Right.
And I'm kind of half joking because about we made the code available on PyPI, so you can install it yourself. Just pip install code timing, it's called, and it's then essentially this 40 lines of code that has a 10,000 word documentation article to it. So it's kind of it's probably the most documented code on PyPI, I guess.
There you go. Get more of the why,
right,
and the implementation and all that. I get a lot of good background, so that's good.
Yes. No, actually, just the other day I got a question from a colleague that was just looking into the code timing one, and it was kind of, why did you implement this as a data class? And then I can just send him a link to a whole section about why. So it's quite useful.
Yeah, it's nice. One of the things that I wanted to develop as we continue this podcast is to kind of get an idea of things that my guests are excited about, that they're currently, either packages or projects they're working with, or even events or things that are happening in the Python world. What are some things that you're currently excited about in the world of Python?
Well, one thing I at least want to plug, it's not nothing new at all, but I always use the IPython REPL when I work with stuff. Just kind of, it kind of, I guess, was the start of the whole Jupyter project and things like this. So it's very closely tied to that one. But I find it's definitely a huge improvement over the usual Python REPL.
What are the things you like about it?
So a few kind of obvious things. It kind of gives you much better of the tab completion history and those kind of things. When you're exploring stuff interactively, all the output is saved in variables, so you can kind of easily go back to through your historical output and just get some data from it.
Nice.
And the help is easily available, that you can just type anything and put on a question mark and you'll get the help text for it. Or if you do double question mark, you get the implementation of the method that you're looking at. So when you're kind of exploring different packages, it's quite powerful.
Yeah, I use in my courses a REPL replacement that Dan suggested to me, which is called bpython.
Yeah.
And has a lot of similar functionality. It has history and other stuff, but you can just put a dot in when you're typing in the REPL, and it'll give you the methods or attributes or whatever, and then also it will show a lot of the documentation as you're typing. And it's probably the most common question I get asked about my courses.
Yes, I've seen those.
What is that?
Exactly. Yeah, we should probably just do a video about the different REPLs. And
yeah, I think maybe if there, I don't know if there's like an article coming out soon, but maybe I would just do a standalone video series that just shows okay, these are the different choices you have and how to implement them.
Yeah,
because there are just beyond just the straightforward thing. And I agree that and sometimes when you're working inside of a Jupyter notebook, having done a little bit of data science in a previous job, is that something I really miss, is that interactivity of okay, well, what can this thing do, and not giving you some of that autocomplete and so forth. So
right. Yeah, so it's
very nice.
Essentially the REPL that's kind of running the Jupyter. So if you've done anything with Jupyter, you'll feel right at home inside of IPython. And the way I actually use it whenever I'm developing, which I haven't seen too many other people do, but it's kind of like using breakpoints and debuggers and so on. But instead of adding a debugger, I typically just say I want to implement a function, and I just add in the def, my function name, parameters, and then inside of there, I import IPython and do IPython.embed. So what that does is that when you call that function, it will start an IPython REPL at that point in your program with all the different variables defined. So then I can interactively figure out how to actually type my code. And so find this really effective. Or
are you inside an IDE then?
I usually just run everything from the terminal, but if you're running inside a terminal in an IDE, then it should work more or less the same.
Okay.
And because then I can end up just implementing my function interactively, and then once I have everything there, IPython kind of has these special commands that are not Python commands, but just helps you out in the REPL. So one of them is history. So then type history, and I see all the stuff I've been doing, and just copy paste that back into my code, and then I have my function ready, and then I can kind of iterate like that. And
yeah, so handy.
Yeah, it's compared to how I used to do it, with tend to be that you kind of run stuff and print something here and there to debug or stuff like this. It's so much easier just to drop yourself into a shell and then play with it, or into the REPL.
Yeah, the thing I'm super excited about right now is I was trying to get the Raspberry Pi 4 when it came out in the summer, and instantly it was sold out. The idea of it has two different video outputs that can be drive two 4K monitors on this tiny little board. It has 4 gigabytes of RAM now.
Okay, that's cool.
And it's drastically faster, so you have to actually get a fan and other stuff for it, depending on the types of things you're going to use it for. And so I was doing a course on the Arduino and kind of got interested in the Raspberry Pi kind of related to that. And then I was helping out somebody through the comments. So I said, all right, well, let me just set this thing up and do Python in it. And so it was really neat. It comes with Thonny is already in it, and it has
okay, cool.
It has this Raspbian OS that has both Python 2 and 3 in it, which is a little confusing. I had to practice some Linux skills, which I'm still working on. The apt-get and all those kinds of things of installing that, making sure I have everything ready to go, and so I was able to sort of set it up, and I said, all right, well, let's go to the next step. Put the IDE for the Arduino on it, and then I put in VS Code, and so I kind of got this little tiny computer that I can kind of just play around with and program on. And then I thought, okay, well, how could I do like screen capture on it? And I wanted to share this stuff, and that's where it's going to get a little more complex for me.
Yeah.
So that's the thing cool. I'm kind of excited about right now, and exploring the different uses. It's just amazing. You can have this whole operating system on a little micro SD card. I want to give people an opportunity to kind of learn some of the things that you're working on. I already mentioned that I'll include links to your PyCon talk from 2019.
Yep.
There's all the articles that we were talking about on Real Python.
Yep.
Are there other things you want to plug or call out to?
So I guess in addition to that, I have a few PyPI packages that I have mainly been working on for because I find them useful. So one is the Pyplugs that we mentioned already. In connection to that, I also have one called PyConfs, which is kind of for dealing with configuration files. So they kind of play very nicely together with the way I kind of tend to structure things. So the PyConfs package, it's essentially a wrapper around the different configuration formats. So it can read TOML files and INI files and JSON files and YAML files and so on, and kind of get them everything into a common interface. So that's one thing I've been playing a little bit with recently.
Great. Okay. I'll include links to that in the show notes.
Yeah. It's still slightly unfinished, but it's getting there. So that's always fun. Yeah, just going back to what you mentioned earlier, I'm really looking forward to the PyCon conference, and both getting to meet people there, but also having a chance to run the Decorators tutorial. I think should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's several hours, right?
Yeah, I think there's 3-hour slots more or less. So you kind of have the days are split in two. So you have one morning session, one afternoon session. So it's half a day.
I'm so looking forward to going and meeting everybody and getting a chance to talk to all the people that are, like you said, the people that visit the site. And
yes. And that's one thing, if we talk a little bit more about Real Python, that's been really cool the last, I don't even know how long, but half a year or so, is the Real Python community that's kind of has been built up.
Yeah. If people want to join, if you'd like to not only get access to all the 300 articles that are on, or more, that are on Real Python, but also you get access to, there's like over 700, 800 lessons now that are available as video there. You get access to the Slack.
Right.
Yeah, it's a really neat community. You get to join this sort of the Real Python members Slack community, and there you can ask coding questions, introduce yourself, and meet other people from all over the world. That's one of the other amazing things about Real Python, is it's such a wide-ranging community we have.
Yes. So on the community, and especially the Slack, as you say, I think it's a really nice place to hang out and just see all the stuff that people are doing there. And we've had members that have kind of started out asking questions, and then they go on to publish great packages on PyPI and things like this. It's really fun to see everything that people come up with and all the different things people are doing there. So that's one thing I really enjoy as well.
Yeah, it's super positive too, which sometimes you get out in the open web and are asking questions, and people are not always as kind. So
right. Yeah, no, it's definitely it's a fun place to hang out.
All right. Well, I want to thank you for joining me on this initial episode here of the Real Python podcast.
My pleasure. It's been a lot of fun to talk and hang out.
Yeah, I know that we can have much more further conversations about some of the other topics, even the ones that we've worked on together, like what was new in Python 3.8 was really great, and another area that's sort of shrouded in mystery sometimes, which is the whole area of type checking.
Yes,
in Python. So I think those would be great conversations to have further on down the road.
Sounds fun.
All right. Well, thanks again.
Thank you.
I want to thank Geir Arne for talking with me, and I want to thank you for listening to the Real Python podcast. Make sure that you subscribe to the podcast in your favorite podcast player. And if you like the show, leave us a 5-star rating and a review. You can find show notes with links to all the topics we spoke about inside your podcast player or at realpython.com/podcast. And while you're there, you can leave us a question or a topic idea. I've been your host, Christopher Bailey, and look forward to talking to you soon.